Today is the concluding day of the G20 meeting being held here in New Delhi, and after that historic New Delhi declaration, there are several important events planned today as well on the concluding day. Let's go right across to where all the action is happening. The Bharat Mandapam, that's the venue for the G20 Summit. My colleague Vasudha Venugopal is joining us right from the Bharat Mandapam. And Vasudha, yesterday was a day full of important, transformational and historic moments, not just for India, but for the world at large, with respect to the New Delhi declaration that was adopted. Tell us, what all can we expect today? There are several bilaterals that the Prime Minister has planned as well.
Yes, Priyanshi. So a large operative and substantive part of G20 is already over with India sort of, creating history, diplomatic history of sorts. And what is going to happen today is the leaders have already visited Rajghat. They have all come back, and this third session has already begun. This is on One Future. It will talk about all the alliances that India has created yesterday, this Biofuels Alliance and, of course, One Future Alliance, which will talk about the future of digitization and also about the Green Pact, which India has sort of pioneered. So all of these things are going to happen today. It's a forward-looking document that India has put forward in the form of Delhi Declaration. Of course, it has navigated the more evident crisis of the language formulation around Ukraine and Russia. But other than that, it also talks about gender empowerment. For the first time under India's presidency, we have an Empower group which is going to talk about women's issues exclusively. That is going to be taken forward in the G20 presidencies that are going to happen after this. So today's day is going to be a day of heavy logistics, and all these leaders and journalists who have come to visit India for this meeting are going to go back, which is going to be an important exercise for India. And other than that, there's going to be a formal handing over of G20 presidency to Brazil. That is also going to be an important thing. The photo ops have already happened. The planting of the tree saplings is also an important thing that was to happen today. And after that, there are important bilateral meetings that India will do, and of course other countries are also looking forward to. There'll also be separate briefings by different countries. That is something that journalists are looking forward to.
Right, and Vasudha, while we speak about the New Delhi declaration that has been unprecedented and that has been, as the government is calling it, path-breaking on several fronts, let's also talk about one other achievement of India's G20 presidency, and that's been the inclusion of the African Union. So currently it's the G20, but with the inclusion of the African Union that India, of course, has pioneered, from the next year it's going to be G21. And you've been reporting on India's push for including the African Union in the G20. So tell us what really went behind this. What did India's push look like to make this finally possible?
So Priyanshi, I think a lot of things that India has done in the last 10 months actually align with India's push for inclusion of African Union in the G20, be it talking about reforms in the multilateral developmental banks or the international institutions, talking about restructuring of the loans that are given to developing countries, helping them with climate financing and helping them raise, funds that would help them to sort of shift to cleaner fuels. So all of these things, and also looking at low-income economies and how digitization will help them, improve their public delivery services. These are certain things that India has been doing, apart from diplomatically calling for the inclusion of African Union in the G20 presidency. Remember, not just Russia, but also US agreed to this and EU agreed to this. So in the last few days, we actually saw a lot of supporting voices in favor of the inclusion of African Union in the G20. So this was something that India was working at in the background. So of course, it's a big success, and the emotive moment is also today. All the world leaders were taken to Bapu's Samadhi at Rajghat. So there was also a ceremonial sort of meditation, and of course, some sort of poignant thinking over what has happened. And of course, it has taken some delay, but this is probably the biggest legacy of India's G20 presidency, this inclusion of African Union in G20 presidency, because this is something that all African countries have been demanding, because they often figure in G20 discussions as being, one of the worst affected by global realities like climate change and also because of conflict, but they are not really represented properly in the global platform. So this is something that could be the biggest takeaway from India's G20 presidency.